Good morning, everyone. Kate Bora and Fiona Pearman joining you for this week's Facebook Live. And this month, we're digging into confidence and self-trust. And I think this is a really interesting topic. Self-trust is not really a word that we tend to dig into particularly often. It's one that many of us are familiar with, but it's a piece that's really critical to confidence, but equally to leadership and how we show up in the world. I think let's start with a definition around what is self-trust. I know for me, it's very much about, honoring your thoughts, your feelings, without the need of external validation. So this piece around, always looking to others to let us know if we're on the right track or we've got the right thing to say, or we're doing the right thing. That we're able to really trust ourselves, to rely on ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, and be able to show up in the world. And we love Merriam-Webster's, lots of different definitions, which is curious around the meaning of self-trust. But she says that self-trust is self-confidence. I think one of the distinctions is that it's not the same as self-esteem. Self-trust is not the same as self-esteem, which is the evaluation of one's self-worth.
Yeah, I think just the fact that it's not easily defined, that there are lots of definitions, can make this a little bit tricky. So, starting to understand what we mean and what matters and why self-trust is so important is really, really critical. And we know that this very much dovetails into our work with confidence. And I think once what we know is, and why this is so important, why it matters to us is once our own self-trust is broken or if it's compromised, there's lots of negative effects of that. There's lots of ways in which that undermines us. It undermines our ability to show up and to do our good work. Because when we can't rely on ourselves, when we don't have that sense, we will lack certainty. We won't be confident in our decisions, in our words. It often will show up as self-doubt, as feeling like an imposter, as having that imposter syndrome. We'll have low self-esteem. We won't have any faith in our capacity or our capability to do what we'd like to do. And I think that limiting belief really means we feel less than and therefore are unlikely to do what we're capable of.
Yeah, I think the important piece is when we don't trust ourselves, it's because we don't have the evidence. We don't have the evidence cycle. We call it the feedback cycle. That I will do what I say, what I will do. That my thoughts, my feelings are true and aligned with who I am and what I believe. And that's where the self-doubt kicks in. And so when we've got evidence that says, I say I'm going to do something, but then I don't deliver on that, even if that's only internal and no one external knows about that, then immediately beliefs start to kick in that either I don't have the skill and capability, or I don't have the motivation, either or. And let's be clear, we've all done it, right? We all say we're going to make commitments. We all say we're going to do things and we don't do it. Most of the time, it's never about skill and capability. It's always about motivation. And that's the tricky piece. And that's the piece that we dig into a lot in our work and setting realistic expectations in ourselves. But I think it's a really useful one to start to dig into, how often do we do what we say we're going to do? And what is going on for us. And this is very much our work, right? Getting beneath the surface of the choices we make, the actions we take, understanding what's driving those, and then resourcing ourselves to reset beliefs, assumptions, default behaviors to be able to show up differently in the world. I think in the context of self-trust, a really important one, and I've said this all the time, is if you don't back yourself, how do you expect someone else to? So if you don't trust yourself, how do you expect other people in your world, your leaders, senior decision makers, extends to our personal world as well. But if we are showing up with doubts and uncertainty, we're indecisive, if we're uncertain, then that has a ripple effect in terms of how other people experience us, and that impacts trust and relationships.
Yeah, we know that this plays out all the time in our work. We do a lot of work around leadership training, about being great leaders. The subject of trust comes up all the time in dynamics, and that accountability is so important. And we know this requires commitment. We know it requires that repeated showing up and the ability to follow through. And it is, trust is really the cornerstone of building relationships, and the place that begins is self-trust, because that's the relationship with myself. And when all those little small, seemingly insignificant things, when we don't give them attention, when we don't follow through, they actually are undermining our ability to have that great relationship with ourselves, which affects our mindset, which is very much the work we do in our Acts of Confidence program. So starting to unpack this and being aware of why this plays out and the ways in which it could be undermining your sense of self, but also your confidence, is really important.
Yeah, there's a great quote. It's not ours. We can't find out, or we don't know whose it is, but confidence comes from keeping commitments to yourself. And it's those commitments that builds that self-trust. We're going to talk more about that later in the weeks to come. If you've enjoyed today's confidence conversation, and you know someone in your network who would benefit from it, we'd love for you to share this video with them. If you'd like to see more of our confidence conversations, head over to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe there, and there's lots of different playlists, hundreds and hundreds of videos, literally, that you can dig into. And when you're ready to go deeper with your relationship with core confidence, head over to our website, coreconfidence.com.au.